And I trust concisely, for I believe that the path from Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, the church in Montgomery, Alabama, where I began my pastorate, leads clearly to this sanctuary tonight. I come to this platform tonight to make a passionate plea to my beloved nation. I deem it of signal importance to try to state clearly, and I trust concisely, for I believe that the path from Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, the church in Montgomery, Alabama, where I began my pastorate, leads clearly to this sanctuary tonight. I come to this platform tonight to make a passionate plea to my beloved nation.
2013, the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, the 150th anniversary of the bloody Battle of Gettysburg, the 150th and the 50th anniversary, respectively, of the two most memorable and iconic speeches in U.S. history. The Gettysburg Address by President Abraham Lincoln, and the I Have a Dream speech by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Both speeches spoke to the fundamental promises of a new nation that meant to ensure the freedoms and dignities of all humans. Both speeches brought forth the critique of where that nation stood in its evolution toward fulfilling those promises through suffering, death, destruction, and even delinquency. Speech that speaks of the failure to fulfill promises that have been corrupted by greed, racism, insecurities, and an imbalance of power. That speech can get you killed. The authors of both of those speeches shared in that end. I'm Reverend Bob Coleman, Chief Program Minister at the Riverside Church. It's my privilege to welcome you to this sacred space, commemorating the life of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., engaging our memories of his life, his murder on this date 45 years ago, and the speech that marked a stark turn of relationships amongst the civil rights community itself and the political powers dramatically. April 4th, 1967, 46 years ago, Dr. King stood on this very spot where I'm standing right now, addressing a packed nave of clergy and laity concerned. He shared with them what has since been called Beyond Vietnam speech. I would like to take this time to name it the Beyond the Gettysburg Address speech, the Beyond the I Have a Dream speech. Reverend Dr. King brought to light the complicities and corruptions of a foreign and domestic policy that was failing us and the world. He named for us the evil triplets of militarism, extreme militarism, and materialism and racism. To boldly call a nation to account for its complicities in death-making, poverty by design, and devaluation of some humans compared to others. This indeed is a recipe to trouble the waters, both within and without the movement. We gather here tonight to remember through storytelling, through a focused attention on the evil triplets and the continued struggle for a new world. We do not gather tonight to name another building, bridge, or street after Dr. King. His message and his witness was radical. His faith-filled ministry was rooted in the gospel of Jesus Christ and Christ's passion. So close now we are on the heels of our experiencing the passion of Christ last week. To be radical is not the shallow militant call to arms and violent bent for destruction of an enemy. To be radical in the time of Jesus and in the time of Dr. King and in our time now is to seek the welfare, the liberation, and the future of everyone, friend and foe. To be radical is to be rooted. That's the root of the word itself. Rooted in the love of God, imaged in every human being, the Imago Dei. We want to be able to recover the radical king that sought to speak the truth to the powers that be while seeking to liberate those powers from their own corruptions without killing them. This, my friends, is a challenge even today. Albert Einstein said of Mahatma Gandhi following his murder, "Generations to come may scarce believe that such a one as this ever in flesh and blood walked upon the face of the earth. Mighty prophets are like that. King among them. They are human. They're troubled by injustice. They're insecure at times, and they struggle to find the right words, the right actions appropriate for the good of all, but somehow they give themselves over. They surrender to their mission, to their calling, to truth-telling, even if it means, as they are fully aware, is going to bring about their own death. Welcome, my friends. Welcome tonight to this commemoration. Listen. Listen. Listen and open yourself to be changed, to be transformed, to be empowered, to continue the struggle. Let us become partners on the road to beloved community. The Riverside Church welcomes you all to the journey.
We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. Freedom, 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 freedom. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. Together we'll have victory. Hand holding hand. Hand holding hand. Hand holding hand. Together we'll have victory. Hand holding hand. Hand holding hand. Hand holding hand. Together we'll have victory. Hand holding hand. Hand holding hand. Hand holding hand. Together we'll have victory. Hand holding hand. Hand holding hand. Hand holding hand. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. We shall not give up the fight. We have only started. We have only started. We have only started. Freedom, 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 freedom.
Good evening, Riverside. I want to express the sincere gratitude and thanks on part of the storytelling group for this evening for this precious invite, for the precious message coming from Reverend Coleman, for the precious work of Carol Nixon, who headed up the social justice component that organized this event, and for all of you have come out, and especially for the musicians and the two young people who brought us down in the procession this evening. All of that is precious to our heart as we come to a moment which is for us jubilant and joyful, but on the other hand filled with tears and sorrows. Precious memories, how they linger, how they ever flood our souls. In the stillness of the midnight, precious sacred scenes still unfold. I am Coley Leanna Liddell Lafayette Clark, former special assistant to Medgar Y. Lee Evers, who on June 12, 50 years ago, was slain, assassinated by a coward in the heat of the night at Jackson, Mississippi. To my extreme right is David Dennis of the Congress of Racial Equality. To my immediate right is Jamal Joseph of the Black Panther Party. And to my left is Ramsey Clark, former Attorney General of the United States of America, and coming, maybe a little late, obviously a little late, will be Ben Cheney, the brother to James Cheney, one of the three young men assassinated, lynched, torn to pieces in Mississippi in 1964. These are our stories. David, would you please join me? Is Claudette Coburn in the house? Sister Claudette Coburn is in the house. We were hoping that she would be able to make it this evening, because when we look at Dr. King's life, we have to really look at him not just as a preacher who led a great movement. Dr. King represents one of the most powerful institutions in his time and as time goes forward. He was a spokesperson for, an interpreter for a great movement that began at Montgomery, where he had gone just to be a preacher, to do the things that preachers do, to spread the word of the gospel of Jesus Christ, to heal some souls, to baptize and to marry and to funeralize, to do the things that preachers do. But a young girl on March the 2nd, 1955, changed his plans. When she sat down on a bench immediately in front of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, and Dexter Avenue, I might remind you or tell you, is built over a slave stall. When that young girl sat down and was arrested and pulled into juvenile court, it was followed by 3 days of mass meetings and the beginning of a major movement, 9 months prior to Rosa Parks, who will in fact lead the boycott movement at Montgomery, and Dr. King will take the hams. David, this evening, let's remember a bit, since you and I are the Southerners on this stage, that hour, that year, that day, Dr. King's evolution.
Well, before that event occurred, let me just back up just a moment here. I was born in northern Louisiana. I'm a product of a sharecropper's family. So my exposure to what was going on in the movement was very limited, because the only thing we had was one of these battery radios prior to that particular time, is that you did not have electricity in terms of where I grew up in. My first encounter with Dr. King, though, was in 1957 when he came to Shreveport, Louisiana, and at the Galilee Baptist Church, and gave the speeches, which they just discovered was really the first time he mentioned I Had a Dream. And his first speech of I Had a Dream really was done at Galilee Baptist Church in 1957. And that began the part of the movement piece is his relationship to Louisiana then was that prior to that is that the Montgomery boycott was really patterned after the Baton Rouge boycott led by Reverend Jemison in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which was the first bus boycott in the United States of America at that particular time. And the founding after that is of SCLC which was done in New Orleans, Louisiana, at a church of Reverend A.L. Davis, who was also very responsible and supportive of the work of the Congress of Racial Equality at that time.
Well, you know, as we reflect on that, David, and we reflect on 55 as we go to 57, on August the 30th, 1955, a young boy came to visit his grandfather in Mississippi, as was accustomed to those of you who ran north with the Great Migration, beginning in the late 1890s and extending actually up to 1960. That young boy was Emmett Lewis Till. He was lynched August the 30th. David, how did that make you feel? Jamal, how did you feel?
The idea of Emmett Till's of Emmett Till's death is something that black families across America felt. And it has to be remembered that when his mother saw his body, she tells the story that she started at his feet and had to work her way up because he had been so brutalized and his body was swollen, and that by the time she got to his head, she could look through and see sunlight coming through the other side because of the large bullet hole. And the undertaker said, "Miss Till, we'll fix him up real good and we'll close the coffin for the services." And Mamie Till, as a young black mother, did one of the most courageous things in our history. She said no. She said, "I want the coffin to remain open because I want the world to see what was done to my son." And though I was very young, I remember that the black press coveted, the Negro press as we call it at the time, Ebony Magazine, Jet Magazine, the Amsterdam News, the Kansas
Medgar
City
Wiley
Star.
Evers in Mississippi,
That's,
yes.
That's exactly right. And they covered it, and families showed the photos. First of all, 50,000 people came in Chicago to see what had happened. And the families would have the magazine covers and would show what had happened, and it really created a sense of collective anger, outrage, but also a sense that we had to do something. And it was actually a few weeks after that that Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus. And it filled me at that time, to be quite honest, with a real sense of fear. And I used to be sent down to Virginia in the summertime. And it filled me with a real sense of fear of what white America would do to a black boy. And I think that was the spirit that my grandmother showed me to, until I heard Dr. King speak and I saw what was happening with the Freedom Riders and with the marchers, that what we had to do in moments like that is come together, stand up and fight. And I joined the NAACP Youth Council when I was 11 years old.
All right. But also stay standing because, David, what about you? Because, you know, we have to reflect on what did it mean for black young men in this nation. Every day, every hour, somebody was hung in the jail. Somebody was said to commit suicide in the jail. Somebody shot in the back because they were said to be fleeing the police. What did it mean for a young man to be lynched, for you, David, living as a sharecropper in a sharecropper household in Louisiana?
We were scared. The families that I was around and grew up with, including my family, became very protective of the young boys. I mean, we weren't allowed to go hardly any place without the father being with us. And fathers at that particular time was not just your biological father. We had what we call the extended family, whereby Mr. Brown and Mr. Jackson, they were all my fathers. So they watched you, they took care of you, and we were told not allowed to go downtown or anything like that, is unescorted by one of our parents or one of the guardians of the community. So the community became very protective of their children, especially the boys.
You know, I remember that, but when Claudette took that seat and the word reached Jackson, Mississippi, that a 15-year-old girl had taken the seat, and I was going to be 15 that summer, I was inspired. I began to think about what could we do in Jackson, Mississippi. But in August, in a household with 8 brothers, in a small town that called itself an urban center, Jackson, Mississippi, with all of our cotton fields and our cane fields, like any other rural city, I was inspired to do something different and that I was inspired to begin to organize my own in anger, righteous anger.
I think for me, and it sounds like for David, it kicked in just a little bit later. That I remember, again, being in Marshall, Virginia, and the town was segregated, but there was a field where the black kids and the white kids would play baseball together.
Yes.
And I had this real anger about what had happened to Emmett Till, and about, you know, in New York City, if we went to integrated schools, we would fight. We would take white kids lunch money, that kind of craziness. So there was a kid who was a white kid who was bossing everybody around on the baseball field. And I remember getting mad, and he said something to me that wasn't really that insulting, but I took it as an insult. I had missed one of the balls, and then I was standing with the baseball bat, and all his kids said, "Hit the ball, don't just stand there like some beanpole." Well, that was enough for me to run over and punch him. See? Now, what happened was I got over to my auntie's house where I was staying with, and all of these pickup trucks pulled up. It turned out that the boy I punched was the son of the Grand Dragon of the Klan.
Oh my.
And getting back to what David said, I was on a bus. The women pleaded with them. They had taken care of their children, and I was on a bus for the first thing smoking back to New York, because they said, "You're not going to come down south and get yourself killed like Emmett Till." Those were the last words that I heard coming back on the bus.
Well, A.A. Rayner's Funeral Home, Chicago, Illinois, 1955. 50,000 mourners come to view the grotesque body. The world views a grotesque body, but A.A. Rayner's Funeral Home, is it 69? We'll bring another young black man here, destroyed by the federal government of the United States of America.
That's right.
A young man from Chicago. You want to talk about that young man.
Well,
and A.A. Rayner's Funeral Home, the black experience.
Fred Hampton, who was the chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. And Fred had been a field organizer for the NAACP before he joined the Panthers. I had joined the Panthers in 1968, and what inspired me was this night, 45 years ago, when Dr. King was assassinated. And it's when I decided that I wanted to be a revolutionary. I wanted to go from being in the civil rights movement to the black liberation movement. And so I was 15 years old, and I joined the Black Panther Party, and 6 months after I joined, I was arrested. And I was in prison for a case called the Panther 21 case. The FBI had systematically begun to attack Panther homes and offices across the country. And in particular, there was a young man named Fred Hampton, who was a tremendous speaker and a tremendous organizer. And what Fred was able to do was to pull together people from all strata of the community. But what really angered what was going on in Chicago was that he was organizing the gangs in Chicago. Famously, he took a gang called the Young Lords and politicized Cha-Cha Jimenez, and the Young Lords went from being the Young Lord Street Gang to the Young Lords Organization.
The Young Vice Lords.
Party. Huh?
The Young Vice Lords.
Yeah, the Young Vice Lords.
Yeah,
exactly.
The kids of
and
the Vice Lords. I know Chicago.
So what Chicago was worried about was that there was something like 120,000 gang members.
Amen.
But there were about 30,000 police officers. And he said, if all of these gang members become political in the way the Panthers were, and they start talking about class struggle and community control, how can we control the city? So on December 6, 1969, there was a raid of Fred Hampton's apartment. And the police fired into the apartment. They called it a shootout, but hundreds of rounds were fired, and Mark Clark and Fred Hampton were killed. Fred was in his bed asleep next to his wife, who was pregnant. The news first reported it as a shootout,
right.
But some young white journalists went to the apartment, and the Panthers did what Mamie Till had done earlier. They said, let's leave the apartment open so the people can come see what happened. And as people came through, they saw that all of the bullet holes were traveling from outside the apartment to inside the apartment, and this hadn't been a shootout. This had been an assassination.
So we go from the dusk to dawn with Martin King at 55, taking the road of the cross at Montgomery, Alabama, to the Black Panther Party. The civil rights struggle will become clearly defined as having been a metaphor for black liberation. So tonight, as we stand here and we begin to remember, we have to remember that this road of the cross, yes, the founding of SCLC, and David can clearly take us there, and then into 60 and the opening of the revolution. And hallelujah, we're traveling. We got the sit-ins. Hallelujah, we're fine. We're taking the front seat for Jackson this time. Hallelujah, we're traveling. We ain't paying no fines. Hallelujah, we're riding America's main line. Come on, David. David Dennis, sit-ins, and the Freedom Ride.
Okay. First of all, I want to clear something up about me. And that is that I wasn't born into the revolution as a hero. I didn't have all these anger. I grew up in an area, when I say I was born and raised on a plantation, I mean that. And you get a plantation psychologist, see what happens on a plantation, you come out of that plantation with a different mindset. So I had to be converted. An example of that is that sometimes God has this plan for you that you have no control over. What happened to me was that when I left Shreveport, Louisiana, I ended up in a high school in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, staying with my aunt. That's why I know about the bus boycotts and stuff like that. But I wasn't involved. One of my classmates in that high school was a guy by the name of Hubert Brown. My classmate in high school, we played ball together and was one of my good friends, who later became H. Rap Brown. So it's like that. I graduated with him. I left that place and went to a place called school, Dillard University, being very lucky because I was the first one in my family, cousins, aunts, uncles, whatever you have, to graduate from high school. When I went to Dillard University, I entered that campus, there were some students who were in jail, been organized by the Congress of Racial Equality and a gentleman by the name of Jim McCain. And as I was sitting on that campus, people were talking about becoming part of what they call a movement and becoming part of coordinated sit-ins, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. What really got me into the movement, going to the first core meeting, there was a young lady by the name of Doris Castle who was on campus speaking one day, and as I walked by, I didn't want to hear anything about no movement, but as I walked by, I said, whoa, wait a minute, Dave, that's a very attractive woman. So I made a U-turn and went back, and I started beginning to talk to her because I wanted a date. And she talked me into going to the first core meeting in New Orleans, Louisiana. So that led to my participating in a sit-in. And then I'm still not converted around the movement. And nonviolence, anything of that nature like that is. I was there for all the wrong reasons. And then came the Freedom Rides. Core, my good friends sitting out here, Marvin, and his wife, Evie. And so the bus got into Anniston, Alabama. I had been put in jail by accident again. And the reason why I got in jail is that Corps had a hit and run thing. As you go sit in, and police tell you to leave, you leave, and they don't arrest you. So finally, Doris talked me into participating, and I thought that would give me a date, and I'd go out, but this time the police did not give a warning. They just arrested everybody. So here I was in jail. But the riots in Anniston, Alabama, seeing people beaten the way they were, and we were supposed to be the host core group in New Orleans, and as Jim Peck and others were brought in bleeding, the core group in New Orleans said, we got to continue this ride. And there was a group of people in Nashville, Tennessee, but Diane Nash and others, well, from that end was saying, we have to continue this ride. And we all met in Montgomery, Alabama. And this is when my conversion happened, and it had a lot to do with Dr. King. We had a meeting that night with a mob outside, cars burning, National Guard coming in, and it was like insanity to me. But we sat in that room, Bernard Lafayette, White T. Walker, Jim Farmer, there was, and myself, Dr. King, Jerome Smith, Doris Castle, Aaron, Julie Aaron, and one of the Thompson sisters. And listen to him to talk about love and death. And we got the idea about the difference between being afraid and fear and how you manage that and what is more important in your life. What is there that you're willing to die for? What is it that you're willing to stand up for? It's got to be something more than just material things. And he got me. I'm going to sit down in a minute, but I'm going to take this moment. It was that particular moment that something grabbed me that told me that no matter what, I had to move forward. And I want to clear something up. There's a lot of stuff going on about Dr. King on that ride. And there was a documentary and there was stuff out about the fact is that made him look like he was afraid. That is not true. And you have to be very careful what people put and how they tell the story. What they don't talk about is the night before when the taxi cab drivers were involved in the Montgomery bus boycott that armed themselves and was ready to free the people that was trapped in the church by the Klan to do whatever was necessary. It was Dr. King who faced both mobs and both groups and saved the lives, I think, of a whole lot of people who were bumming and who were also trying to kill and lynch the people who were in that church. What they don't talk about is that Dr. King who made that stand about nonviolence and love and was able to, some way, to calm the crowd at that time. So my belief and my understanding and my love for this movement, that changed me in my life and made me part of what it became a great movement in this country is, and I'm very happy to be on the stage with the people here who really made this thing happen. Woo.
David didn't color that powerful moment at Montgomery when the bus pulls in. It was so quiet, I'm told. They didn't see the mob. And then suddenly over the intercom came the words, "The Freedom Riders have come to tame the South." And there was 5,000 angry white folk. That's not so long ago. When we began to look at Martin King, we have to also remember the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and their great work, and that everybody will meet in Mississippi. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I want to bring Ramsey into this discussion from the federal point of view and from his memories of this hour. So come on up and talk with us, Ramsey. We need a full clear. I told him as a former Attorney General of the United States, I told Ramsey the other evening I was a little concerned in 1961 at Tougaloo College, and that's when we came in the movement, as I was invited to see the film Salt of the Earth. It was just another film as far as I was concerned for my social science class. But as I approached Brownlee Hall, Ramsey, I was wondering why those black white men was standing at the door taking pictures of me.
You knew a pretty girl.
I know I was pretty, but that's another story. When a white man's taking pictures of you in Mississippi. So I came back out and started to walk toward the other end, and another white man stepped out and started taking pictures of me. And I thought, gee, you're a Hollywood star. You know, nobody had ever taken pictures of me before. So Ramsey, I was told it was the FBI. And that evening in 1961, along with Malcolm X and Dr. King, I entered the FBI files, just a kid going to see a film, Salt of the Earth. Of course, it's a great film about the great labor movement, which is also a part of the civil rights movement. So talk to us, Ramsey, about your remembrance of this hour.
I'm going to tell one story that I think reveals a quality in Dr. King that was essential to all that he accomplished. It was revealed to me so clearly during the Selma and Montgomery March. For 2 Sundays in a row, black folk in Alabama and a few from outside had gathered in this little town of Selma, about 50 miles from the capital in Montgomery, under Dr. King's inspiration, planning to march 50 miles over red clay roads in the hot sun, even in the early spring, for the right everyone was supposed to have, the right to vote. And on both Sundays, they'd been dispersed by, I hate to tell you his name, but it was Clark. I don't remember his first name. Jim. Been trying to remember his last, forget his last name, and here she is reminding me of his first name. Anyway, I don't know his horses' names either, but they were stepping on folks and kicking them around. And finally, the president authorized federal forces to protect the marchers, and he sent me down in charge of it. And we came across that Raymond Pettis Bridge, one of the most beautiful sights I ever saw, because that's where they'd been stomped on, and they were marching, hundreds and hundreds of people, but for 18 months we'd been litigating for the right to march from Selma to Montgomery. No person in his right mind would march from Selma to Montgomery unless somebody told you you couldn't for a reason that you couldn't accept. And finally, we had a court order that authorized 2 abreast on the side of the road, 50 people all together, marching from Selma to Montgomery. And coming across is one of the most beautiful sights I ever saw. Unfortunately, I was standing too close to a radio phone, and my voice was picked up, and I was praising the marchers, and it got in the New York Times. It got me in a lot of trouble. But that first night, the farmer in Lowndes County, which was notorious for racism in those days, the label for that town was "Don't let the sun go down on you, black man." They didn't say black man, they used the N word, in Lowndes County. And here we had 50 of them, including Dr. Martin Luther King, marching 2 abreast. We got out to this farm where we already agreed with the guy and paid him some money, a farmer. He wouldn't let us do it. He said, I'll have to move out. I can't afford to risk it, and you just can't stay on this farm. So we had to get down the road, and we found a little park, and we pitched tents, sidewall tents, and we had lots of soldiers there. I won't tell you how many, but we had 1,000 military police from 3 armed services of the United States government to protect these marchers, and for good reason. I've been driving up and down that road looking for sniper spots and all. They built fires, and we had sentries around. It looked like a Civil War scene, really. And after dinner, which was about 11, Dr. King said, he'd already told me I had to get him out of there about 5 in the morning because he was going to fly to Chicago and come back. That hadn't been revealed particularly, but he had something important he had to do in Chicago, and we arranged it. And so he wanted to go to bed. And we walked up and standing by this tent where we had sleeping bags on the ground and looked back at the crowd, and there were about 49 marchers and nobody else fooling around. The soldiers were at some distance, maybe 30, 40, 50 feet. And he said, you can never be afraid. The fear was palpable. He said, if you're afraid, it will shrivel your soul. You'll accomplish nothing. He went in that tent and laid down on a blanket on the ground. I checked on him from time to time, and he was sleeping like a baby or an angel. Perfect serenity and a smile on his face. And he came back the next day, and we marched the rest of the way. And thousands and thousands, no one had ever expected it. More than 50,000 people gathered in front of the Capitol building in Montgomery, Alabama.
Thank you, Ramsey.
And the Voting Rights Act passed August the 5th of that year. 7% of the African American population of voting age in Mississippi in the presidential election in 1964 dared to vote. It was dangerous. In 68, 70% voted. And the South began to change. And Dr. King, his face, perfect serenity, had led the way.
Hey, scared of your dogs. I ain't scared of your dogs. A tale of two cities. But it's a tale of the evolution of a man and other men and other women. Elder Baker, the birth of Fannie Lou Hamer in Mississippi in '62 with the founding of COFO, the Council of Federated Organization. It is a tale of a struggle that will be remembered because it inspired struggle across the world. SNCC chapters spread out all over the world. Student Alabama Coordinating Committee's chapters in Algeria, in Japan. The same was true for the Congress of Racial Equality. We didn't get any money. The NAACP got the money, but we did some powerful work, and we did it because it had to be done. So I ain't scared of your dogs. I want to take us now to 1964. And we have just been joined by a wonderful man, Ben Chaney. Meridian, Mississippi. Come on up. Join me. His brother. His brother, along with two young white men, the sum of 64, will pay the ultimate price. And I bring him up now because, you know, the movement is too big for us to deal with these ever unfolding memories. We have to take what we can and move on. But I want Ben to speak as a young boy in Mississippi. A young 12-year-old boy who is sitting here now with a man who eulogized his brother, Dave Dennis. Talk about your experience in the development of the most powerful movement in the history of the planet, from my perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening. I don't know if I can talk as a 12-year-old kid anymore, but I need to apologize to my leader here, Dave Dennis, for being late, and to my lawyer, Ramsey Clark, and to Jamal Joseph, who did a fundraiser for our organization years ago. But I like to just listen, from sitting out there, I listened to Jamal tell us the story about Fred Hampton, and I heard the story about Emmett Till, and I was reminded how Jim Crow existed back then in the South and in the North. They did the same thing. Now, this is very important to me, the issue of Jim Crow, because he's very real today. We never dealt with him. And you see Jim Crow manifest himself every few years. You saw him in this last election manifest himself where people had to stand in line for hours and hours to vote. That's Jim Crow working. We see Jim Crow right now in the fact there are so many African-American males, former Panther members who are still locked up in jail for 20, 30 years. America has its political prisoners. That's Jim Crow working right there. So if we don't deal with Jim Crow once and for all, you know, we'll be having events like this for somebody else, for some other people a few years from now. We got to deal with Jim Crow, okay? It's very important, okay? Regardless what we do, after we leave, we need to leave here with a mindset. We got to confront this sucker. He's the same old sucker. Yes, ma'am.
We're going to deal with that in the next panel.
They're going to deal with Jim Crow in the next panel, okay? They're going to deal with Jim Crow. They're going to hang Jim Crow tonight. We're hanging Jim Crow tonight.
Let us deal with 64.
Okay, we're going to deal with 64. What 64 was about Jim Crow. That's what 64 was about. You can't get away from this guy. 64 was about Jim Crow. Everything he did in 64, he's doing now in 2013. It was all about him. It has always been about the mindset of a group of people who feel they can control the world. They can control anybody who lives in this country. They do what they want to do the way they want to do it, and they enforce their will upon all of us. And 64 was about overcoming that, confronting this guy and overcoming him. It's not a one individual. It's not a it's one mindset, really. But you can't pinpoint, you can't walk and say, hey, this guy's white, he must be part of Jim Crow crew. You can't identify him like that. You're identified by the actions and their speech, mainly by the actions. So 64 was about Jim Crow. The entire movement was about Jim Crow. Jim Crow is this concept of superiority that some white folks have. And they project this thing in so many different ways. We see it every day. I saw it right on the subway coming up here. Jim Crow, wide open. We see it, especially in this city. He's much quiet in this city. He's down. He's on the low down in this city. But other places, he's wide open. Like in Florida, the election, he was wide open. You know, Ohio, he was wide open. And, you know, we knew.
How did you feel when they destroyed your brother in Mississippi in '64?
Okay, some things are very hard to talk about.
I know it is, and that must take us.
And she wants us to talk about feelings. She wants to talk about feelings, okay? I felt the same way then as pretty much I feel now. I was angry, and I'm still angry. One reason I'm angry is because of Jim Crow. That's why I'm angry, you know, and I can't get away from it. I feel that too many people have died, have made too much sacrifice, so we still got to confront this guy. And we haven't confronted him yet. We got to deal with him. We got to stop playing this game, this new Jim Crow mess. There ain't nothing new about Jim Crow, same old sucker. We got to stop playing this game and really deal with him. I was angry in 1964, and I'm angry now. I knew what the cause was, and I know what it is now. I think we got to deal with it. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. You're going to be really, he's going to fire up the next session, you all. Don't go anywhere, because he's going to fire this next session. So as we come here tonight, I want you to take up your programs and carefully explore your entire program. Look on the back, because there are wonderful words from wonderful people. 1965, Dr. King comes to Chicago. Well, in 1965, first he goes to a project founded by Bernard and Coley Lafayette at Selma, Alabama. Then in 1965, he comes to Chicago chasing Coley and Bernard Lafayette. And there he begins a movement to end slums. And that progression out of the South, after having gotten the Civil Rights Act, a Voting Rights Act, well, the Civil Rights Bill and the Voting Rights Act, he comes to Chicago to open up an urban struggle. So we leave that dust of dawn that had been the civil rights movement, and we enter dark waters. Long, hot summers of discontent. We enter dark waters. For the first time, we are dealing with real politicians. Labor, Chicago Missionary Society, and the most esteemed of all political machines in the country, that of Mayor Richard Daley, for whom Lyndon Johnson, who was running for president that year, said, if I had 5 mayors like Daley, I wouldn't need to campaign. Put that in your little sack called the Mind tonight, and let's shake it up. Yes, we are coming now into dark waters. We are forced to leave Chicago. An open housing bill is signed, and we head into the national peace movement. We are leaving Chicago on our way to Riverside, and that famous speech. We're leaving Chicago on our way to the Poor People's Campaign. But we're leaving not in fear, not in desperation. We are leaving to take this campaign to another level, because Dr. King's wife, Coretta King, had already been involved around issues of peace in '63. Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, '63. Malcolm X, '63. Malcolm X comes in '65 to Selma, Alabama, to join the spirit of the Muslim struggle in this country and the international Muslim struggle in this country, to that of the civil rights movement. He comes to Brown Chapel, and everybody thought, well, anybody coming out. Folk, you couldn't even get near Selma that night when Malcolm X showed. He showed that black folk in the South were not into religious ideology. If you were about the freedom struggle, we embraced you. And even though Dr. King couldn't be there and Coretta had to be there, we embraced Malcolm at Selma, Alabama. And in '65, as we are entering these dark waters, and the Prime Minister of France won't let his plane land, we knew that he and King were moving toward the Riverside, facing Canaan. So as we come to the close of the storytelling session, each of the storytellers want to invite you into a moment when you can remember that there is a prison incarceration nation that imprisons our minds on the one hand, but as far as Africans and Latins are concerned, and indigenous people, we don't even count them anymore. They imprison our children behind bars, killing our childbearing years. We are in the grips of a massive genocide. And we cannot ignore that. We cannot downplay that. We cannot fool around with that. We have got to free all the political prisoners. Free every one of them. And we have got to, folk, say to this nation in a way in which it can understand and never forget that the pathway for youth is to college and not to prisons. As I stand here tonight, as all of us, would we all rise and come to the stand, because I think we need to all stand here. All of us need to come to this podium where Dr. King stood. As we stand here with our planes flying over Korea tonight, with our military stationed all over Africa tonight, 28 bases in Africa. We are in 102 countries. We cannot say louder or clearer than Dr. King said it, that the American government is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. But we must say it with the understanding that if it's the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, then we must give up silence. Yes, silence is betrayal. We must put our feet to the streets. We must write letters. We must do everything possible to take us into a new era where we won't so be so covered in blood. Because that is our military. This is our government. And everything it does in our name. We, the people. We enter in dark waters. Dark waters. But I can see ahead a bright and shining light. Precious memories. How they linger. How they ever flood our souls. In the stillness of 100,000 midnights, precious sacred scenes still unfold. Old time singing, whoa, old time dancing, precious sacred scenes. Let me see that black power fist. Power to the people this time. Still unfold. Storyteller signing out.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but
If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. Whether we believe it or not, these are the words of a president of the United States of America in 1803 in a letter to the Treasury, Thomas Jefferson. This evening we have an unusual experience in one sense in that he was the son of a president, grandson of a president, but not in another, because more than 1 million of the children that came out of slavery, include myself, are children of unwilling relationships between master and slave. Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson was such a relationship. But we shall not linger there. We will remain vigilant against the rape of women and violence against women, but we will remain loving of all the children, especially those children of black women who endured the pain and suffering of that terrible hour of the enslavement. But when you see Shannon Lanier, and I want you to refer to the program for his background and add to it the fact that he is a journalist, a certified journalist and producer. He will be taking over this section of the program. Shannon, come on up here. You know, I was already flirting with young men. Come on around here. Let me get out of the way and let him take the stage. Come on, y'all. Let's give it to him. Shannon Lanier, great-grandson of Thomas Jefferson.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. It's an honor to be here in this prestigious moment at this particular time. Is everybody okay out there? You look like you need a stretch. How about you stand up real quick, get a stretch. Everybody stand up. Come on, let's get to the feet if you're able to. Let's stand up. Make sure you still got the blood flowing in your bones. But get you up, get you ready, because it's time to have a conversation. It's time to get active. It's time to now know that you all know how to stand. So now it's time to find out what you're willing to stand for, or what we have not been willing to stand for in the history of our country. So now it's time to have a conversation. Now it's time to keep it real. Now it's time to get to the bottom of a lot of the problems we are still facing today. We heard already earlier some of the things that happened in history and some of the personal experiences that our panelists have gone through. But now it's time to find out what else is different and what has changed, or why hasn't it changed. Joining me at my far left here at the panel is Irma Behar. She is the Vice Chair of International Relations for Gabriola USA, please. A member of the organization International Women's Alliance. She works with the Audre Lorde Project. So give it up one more time for Irma. Irma Behar. Next up we have Reverend Courtney C.D. Witherspoon. He is the president, yes, it's okay. He's the president of the Baltimore Southern Christian Leadership Conference. To my right, please, yes. To my right, Victor Toro, and he is with the May 1st Coalition, and he's also an undocumented immigrant fighting for U.S. citizenship. All right. Yeah. Next to him is his translator that will be helping us today, Meches. Thank you for being here as well. And last but definitely not least, we have Ann Wright, who is a retired U.S. Army colonel and former U.S. diplomat who resigned, this is important, who resigned because she stood up for her opposition against the Iraq War. Please give it up for our panel today. All right, so you heard some of the words of Dr. King, you heard the words of Thomas Jefferson, and you heard some of the stories that we just were experienced through our panel. And the question that I have to throw out first in this discussion is, if we were faced with so many issues, and I know Brother Cheney definitely wants to comment on this as well, that we were faced with so many issues, but why is it that the same speech that Dr. King stood here and gave so many years ago, why can that speech be read today, interpreted today, and still be relevant today with those same words, with those same principles, maybe different words and names we put in, but it's still relevant? So the question I have, and we'll start with you because I know you do a lot of this work in the community, have we come anywhere? How far have we gotten, and why have we not gotten further?
First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. We thank the pastor and the Social Justice Committee and all of those folk who are responsible for bringing us here today. I think that when I look out over this crowd and I look at the people that are seated even behind me and even beside me, I know that we have had to make some concrete gains in the struggle for social justice. But I think that one of the reasons why we are all here today is because we acknowledge the need to continue the fight. Regardless of what your political philosophy or ideology is, we've got to continue the fight for social justice in our society. The title for the speech that Dr. King gave here at this particular church, and this is so very important, Beyond Vietnam, a time to break the silence, a time to break the silence. And I think that that is one of the reasons why this struggle is still very relevant and this gathering is relevant, because we have got to break the silence. One of the speakers before me indicated that Dr. King said that silence is betrayal. He also said that in the end we will not remember the words of our enemies but the silence of our friends. So we've got to speak out against the issue of mass incarceration. We've got to speak out against the continued incarceration of our political prisoners. We want Mumia Abdul-Jamal brought home. Yes. We want Marshall Eddie Conway brought home. We've got to fight to break down this prison industrial complex, because there are more African American people today in this country who are in prison than were in slavery in the 1800s. And we've got to speak it plain, and we've got to end the silence.
Well, thank you very much. Preaching, brother, that's a preacher for you. Well, I know a lot of the problems that you're speaking about that exist. We call them the three threats of militarism, racism, and extreme materialism. So one of the things about, militarism, can you speak to that, and some of the problems that we're facing now with the military and the fact that we're still fighting and sending money for wars instead of helping the people that are existing in our own societies?
Well, indeed. The speech that Martin Luther King gave in 1967 is so relevant today. In fact, I'm sure many of you all have read that speech over the last couple of days, and all you have to do is just change a couple of words. We changed the word Vietnam and we put in there Iraq or Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. We changed the words to, I resigned over the Iraq war and over a couple of other things, but one thing that I'll give George Bush, the president, a little credit for. He did have a phrase. I don't like the phrase. It's called the axis of evil. But in these days, it's not the axis of evil that is Iraq, Iran, North Korea. It is that same axis of evil that Martin Luther King spoke about, but he called it the triplet. Racism, extreme materialism, and militarism, where we are now spending so much on our military that we are, as Dr. King said, we are stripping down our own society because we need an enemy. The United States elite needs an enemy so that it can transfer resources from schools, from health, from the societal fabric that we really need in order to have reasonable lives for our citizens. And the political and financial elites are willing to take those funds and put it into militarism, to put it into finding an enemy and let's go after them. Martin Luther King talked in his speech about communism, that was the enemy back in that day in 1967. America was fearful of communism. Well, you just transfer the name terrorism. And now the wealth of America goes to fight terrorism all over the world, while our own society and the societies of others that we are trampling on go down. So it's up to us. I'm wearing a t-shirt. Many of you all have seen this shirt over the many years. It's called "We Will Not Be Silent." And I think for us, as we continue to talk about in this panel of those three, the triplets, the axis of evil, that we will not be silent. We cannot afford to be silent, and we must stand up and we must take on our own government to say no to militarism.
And I want to also bring in, thank you. I want to bring in Victor, because Victor is one who definitely was not silent when he was being tortured and going through some of the extreme things that he had to go through. But it brings up the whole notion of, immigrants also fighting for not only the people who are U.S. citizens, but those people that are here trying to still be free from the persecution from their own countries. So Victor, can you speak a little bit to the fact of what could be done or what hasn't been done and should be done to help immigrants here?
Dice que quiere que hable sobre qué es lo que pueden hacer para los inmigrantes y qué es lo que no se ha hecho y qué es lo que se puede hacer por los inmigrantes.
Bueno, yo vengo en representación de los indocumentados.
He's coming in representation of all the undocumented.
Dicen que encuestados somos 12 millones.
Que by the statistics we are 12 millions.
Somos parte de los 50 millones de la gente que habla español aquí en los Estados Unidos.
We are the people that the 50 ¿cuánto dijo? 50 millones. 50 million people that speak Spanish.
Y estos 12 millones pues viven una situación que Martin Luther King vivió en su momento luchando por su pueblo, por su raza.
These 12 million people are living like facing the same things that Martin Luther King faced in his time, and with her community and with his people.
La gente puede apoyarnos de diferentes maneras.
People can support us in so many ways.
Nosotros, al igual que los afrodescendientes, llenamos las cárceles de los Estados Unidos.
We also, like the African Americans, we fill up the jails. We fill up the jails as well.
Y hay que luchar por su libertad.
And we had to fight for their liberty.
Por sus derechos.
For the freedom and for their rights.
Y los inmigrantes son deportados diariamente ya 1 millón en el último año.
And the people, the immigrants, are deported every single day, and just the last year was like 1 million people deported.
Ustedes y todo el pueblo puede ayudar a impedir esas deportaciones.
And you and all the community and all the people can help us to stop deportations.
Nosotros necesitamos la legalización.
We need the legalization for all.
Y ustedes pueden apoyar la lucha por la legalización para los 12 millones de inmigrantes indocumentados en este país.
And you and everyone can help us fight for the legalization for the 12 million people here in the United States.
Nosotros no luchamos para vivir, para sobrevivir.
Nosotros, we don't fight for not just to survive, for have a better life.
Nosotros luchamos para vivir como todos ustedes.
We fight to live like you, like we have like good condition of life.
Esta lucha que nosotros damos todos los días en las calles.
This fight is every single day in the streets.
Si el padre de los derechos civiles viviera y como vive con nosotros, estaría ahí apoyándonos.
If Martin Luther King, that is the father of the civil war movement, will be alive, will be with us fighting in the street.
Thank you. And you know, it seems that a fight is needed, but I want to know, why do you believe, we have another comment in the back here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we got a comment from the back row too. Okay.
Yeah, I am really driven to speak at this moment because it's very important that we understand that we have to break the silence around Central South America and the Caribbean.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
And we have to break it now because as I stand here, I recognize that NAFTA, the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement, and CAFTA, the Caribbean Free Trade Agreement, and other tariffs are destroying the people of Central and South America and the Caribbean. But again, you know, as we're talking about, when we talk about having to remember that we are covered in blood, and we are definitely covered in blood on this issue because Mexicans belong here, always have been here, even before we even thought of being here, they were here. But it's important that we do it now because as I stand here tonight, Haiti is under the thumbs of the United States of America, France, Canada, and whoever else can climb on board. Haiti is being destroyed. The first republic on planet Earth, the first democracy on planet Earth is not the United States. The United States was a slaveocracy. Haiti said in 1803 as it enrolled to its independence, the first article of this Constitution, that we welcome as citizens all the freedom-loving people of this world. So as we let our businesses go down and destroy Central and South America, destroying the land, destroying the people, destroying the energy and the resources of these people, remember that we are one people.
Yes.
A good 70% of Central and South America got off the same boats that my folk got off coming in from Africa. And the indigenous populations were always already there. And they are the majority populations of South America. So I call especially on Africans in the United States to open your ears, folk, because that 3 million people that are, as we approach about 3 million in the jails, there's 4 million Africans that came out of slavery, are going to grow and grow fast. So please, please.
All right, thank you. You know, we talk a little bit about the fight and the fight that needs to happen and about being silent, but I know, Irma, you deal a lot with this and even fighting just for the rights of those that are already here, but women and women's rights and being equal.
Yes, I do, Shannon. I also just want to say, I just wanted to add to the conversation about militarization that currently as we speak, that the United States is present in Malaysia, in the Philippines, because of the Asia pivot that the Obama administration called for last year. So about 60% of their military is being sent there. And as of today, it marks actually the beginning of what we call the Baliktayan exercises, which is military exercises in the Philippines. So speaking on behalf of like a women's organization of Gabrielle USA and with the International Women's Alliance, what does that actually mean to women here in the United States, but also abroad? It means more violence, right? It means violence to women. It means that military folks are going to be raping our women. And because of the agreement that the United States have, for example, with the Philippines called the Visiting Forces Agreement, it basically means that the United States can do whatever they want, right? And what would Dr. Martin Luther King say about that? He would be opposed to these foreign policies. And so the Beyond Vietnam speech was really about the civil rights movement being focused in the United States, but it's beyond that. It's because being here in the United States, we have a duty to actually look at our other brothers and sisters that's worldwide, globally. And so speaking on behalf of not just like the Women's Alliance, but also the International Women's Alliance, but also a part of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, two-spirit, and trans and queer community. I know it's very long, but just to say that we trans women and also women in general. It's when you think about people in leadership or whatnot, it is the women that is taking care of folks, in home. It is the 4,700 people that leave the Philippines every day. 70% of them are women, so they're mothers who are leaving their children just so that they could send money abroad to basically take care of their kids. And here in New York City, we see the domestic workers. We see that there's a growing number of traffic workers. And a lot of those folks are women that don't have any kind of health care benefits, that don't have any kind of safety or any kind of resources, right? Because they don't know about it or they're excluded because they're undocumented.
Well, thank you. I think one of the big points that you all here make in the various different issues that we just touched upon is that there are still disparities, there's still issues, there's still fights that need to be had. But I know a lot of times people are, blocked by all the legal assaults that are happening on our community, where they're putting laws in place that people cannot even fight for the rights that they have because they're hiding it. And maybe people call it the new Jim Crow or the old Jim Crow because it still exists, but now there are things being done to hold people back. I know some people may be familiar with Free Angela and all the political prisoners. There's a new movie that's coming out. You have to see it. It comes out Friday. Check it out. But it's just another example of how the legal system is standing in the way. And now you have things like anti-welfare and the anti-immigration, the stop and frisk, mass incarceration, DOMA, war on education, voting, and anti-affirmation and everything that's going on. Can you talk a little bit about that, Reverend, and what we can do about the legal assaults that are happening in our community that are forbidding us or making it harder for us to even fight the challenges at hand?
One of the things I think is important, I think that we are under attack. I think that those of us who are progressive, we are under attack. But I think that we've got to be very cognizant of one thing. While there may be quote-unquote legal barriers, there's nothing that you and I can't do as a community. One of the things is that the vast majority of Dr. King's activism was essentially challenging the system and challenging the status quo. Half the stuff that Dr. King was not considered legal at that particular time. That means that some of us are going to have to get out of our comfort zones. We're going to have to take some risks. Some of us are going to have to go to jail, just as many of the panelists who have already spoken have already done. But the next generation is going to have to pick up the baton, and we're going to have to continue this fight for justice. When I think about the international issue, I also think of former Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez. And he was a champion for being able to stand up to the status quo and be able to take a definitive position. And Dr. King spoke about the urgency of now, and I can just hear him from even over the balcony of heaven today saying that there is an urgency of now in relationship to issues like gentrification, in relationship to mass incarceration, in relationship to the issues that face our community. So we've got to dig down deep inside, and we've got to grab hold of a little bit of that King in each of us. It's not just enough for us to recognize Dr. King on his birthday or come to church on the day of his death, but we've got to embody the spirit of Dr. King every single day.
Part of what happens with the assault is that our frontline fighters in the courtroom are also being attacked, and we have to acknowledge Lynn Stewart. Who fought side by side for us in the Panther Party and the Black Liberation Movement, who for doing that, who is, at her age, being sent to prison. Lawyers who have been disbarred, people who are saying you're part of an exclusive club that we call the United States Bar, and that if you violate that we will punish you and criminalize you in the same way that they're trying to criminalize the movement. Let's understand what happens to movement folk, and let's understand to people who are political prisoners. It is a tactic of the government, and a tactic of the legal system to criminalize the movement, as Malcolm X says, to make the victims look like the criminals and the criminals look like the victims. And it's why it's so important to keep talking. I know we may get kind of bored of talking about political prisoners and talking about freeing the former Panthers, freeing Mumia, but it's so important to understand why they are there and how these trumped-up charges were meant to crush out a movement and to pump fear in the hearts of folks. One other thing I want to talk about very quickly in terms of what we need to be doing. We have to embrace our young people in the struggle. Mumia was 14 years old when he joined the Black Panther Party. I was 15 years old. We talk about people who were here, who were part of the civil rights movement. They were teenagers. They were college students. The movement was exciting. It was cool. It was hip. We would quote lyrics in terms of, you know, the way young people quote Jay-Z lyrics and Kanye West lyrics. We would quote speeches from different people. I remember Rap Brown. The Ramsey Clark is going to go see Imam, and I remember Rap Brown would give speeches, Bobby Seale would give speeches, Eldridge Cleavers, and we would quote that to each other like they were poems or like they were lyrics. We were on fire with the movement. So we have to engage young people, and the way to engage them is through the work. Now, what do I mean through the work? If you drag them to rallies, if you just say that you have to kind of be aware, and if the only time they see us get together is at events like this, they will shut down, tune out, they will sit in the back and text while the speeches are going on. Right. It's kind of like, you know, when you unwillingly drag young people to church on a Sunday morning, Rev, how do you make those services excited? You bring hip hop to the service. You bring praise dance, but you bring stuff that they can do 6 or 7 days a week. To be in the movement was to get up every day and to feed people. To be in the movement was to get to every day and visit a prison. To be in the movement was to get to every day to do community patrols, to challenge the police. So our engagement is our excitement, and our excitement is our everyday commitment. And our everyday commitment is to do some things that are exciting, that makes people, as my sister Sonya Sanchez always talks about, feel their humanity. Mumia writes in his letter in the back that Dr. King felt a common cause with the peasants of Vietnam who were being bombed by the most powerful military in the world. It was a connection to understand that they weren't just faceless people whose skin was different from ours on the news, but that could be our brother, our sister, our mothers, and our fathers. We've got to come back to that sense of community, that all of these children are our children, and where our children understand that every adult in there is a mother, a father, grandmother, and that everybody incarcerated is their brother and their sister. It is a fight for the human family.
Now, Jamal talked about the young people, and I just want to, as one of the younger people here today, just also encourage that if you're trying to get young people involved, that sometimes these days it may not be about a march or holding up a sign, but they're so connected to social media, they can start their own digital or virtual march. They can put their own videos and messages out there and get everybody tweeting and connecting through social media as a way of their protest for the new generation. So don't knock that opportunity, because it can still reach many millions of people by using that new outlet of media. Now, another thing you talked about, Joe, was Jamal was basically talking. We need to talk more. We need to get out there. But some people that I spoke to earlier feel that, you know, there's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of people talking, especially politicians, that will talk, and nothing ever gets done, or not enough gets done, because they feel as long as we're talking, we're doing something, right? As long as the talk continues, but where's the action? Why haven't we got to the action of the talk that needs to be done for more to happen? So I'm going to bring in Brother Ben here, because I know he's anxious to talk about getting this action started. What can be done to move past just talking about it, to move past to actually having action and getting people involved?
Years ago, we had an organization on 119th Street and Lingus Avenue. We believed in doing three things: educate, agitate, and mobilize. That was it. Once you educate it, you can agitate, and if you gotta agitate, you gotta keep it up. You gotta keep it going, keep it going. They're gonna try to stop you, you just gotta keep doing it. You just can't give up, you can't stop. You gotta have faith, like Ramsey said, what King talked about earlier about having courage. You gotta agitate, always agitate. Wake up, think about how you can agitate, and don't stop the agitating, that's it.
Don't stop, okay.
I'm glad Ben have brought this issue of education on the table, because as far as some of us are concerned, that's the most important and serious issue facing us and our young people today. This country is moving closer and closer to trying to privatize our education system in this country. And if they do that, and they're capable of that, young people, especially those of color, are going to be lost. I'm going to give you an example. In the second debate between McCain and Obama, McCain made a statement that the education system, the model for the education in this country is what's going on in New Orleans. At this particular time, over 6% of the schools in New Orleans are charter schools with private money, no base, and no local control whatsoever. It's all controlled by the state. This particular move is being moved across the state, but is also being moved across the country and being touted as being one of the greatest educational system new things that's happening. This is not true. So what has to happen here is, in terms of what we're talking about, is people being able to look at what is happening to our kids and what is happening to our kids and turning them onto the streets in the pipeline to jail. This is happening every place. Your mayor in the city of New York is one of the most, well, he's more involved in it. But it's not just him, it's the people with money. Gates, Buffett, all of this money, and even the stimulus money going into education, the I-3 programs, are going into privatization and charter schools in this country. Right now, Teach for America is $1 billion program. Over 50% of the teachers in New Orleans are Teach for America. The teachers after Katrina, which gave this country the first time to start over from scratch since the Reconstruction of any city, the first thing they did was to fire all of the teachers in the city of New Orleans, which meant is the destruction of the middle class, important middle class base of that city. And they were replaced primarily by Teach for America. So what you need to do is really pay a lot of attention to what's going on, because the big companies, Edison and others, big corporations, are now moving in to take control of our education system. If that happens, we know what's going to happen to our kids.
I think Brother Dennis makes a good point, and all the points here. Now, unfortunately, we don't have enough time to get to everyone's comments, and we could go on and on with some of the problems, some of the issues, and some of the solutions that need to be had in our communities. But one thing, as he talked about, is important is to educate yourselves, educate each other about these topics. Don't just let the secrets and the solutions be hidden in a book for you. Read a book, pick it up, and educate it, pass it forward so others can just share that knowledge. Because if we don't, then these things that are existing are still going to continue to exist, and all we're going to do is talk about them. So I encourage you again to educate each other and continue the fight. And remember, I already know you know how to stand because you stood earlier. So remember, you have to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. The question is, what will you stand for? Thank you to our panels, and thank you to everybody. And we're going to keep the program going, so don't go anywhere. We have a lot more for you, but I just want to thank the panel as we take our seats and let you enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you.
You didn't know I was this tall, did you? I don't think I'm going to move up here. How are you? We want to thank you for coming out tonight on this very important night. We want to thank you for understanding that the information that we get here, we would take out to our communities, to our churches, to our mosques, to all of the places that we go and speak, to our schools, because as many of the speakers have said, this is indeed an attack on the middle class, period, because they say the poor people are already under control. But this is a major attack on people in the middle class, my dear brothers and sisters, where that movement came out of those young people who were educated, who had gotten an education. So on many levels, when we leave here, we've got to go home, we've got to go back, to all of our places and say simply, I am going to return to activism again. I am going to move out, because if we do not do that, we might as well pull down the shades, my brothers and sisters, and then pick up the wine and drink ourselves to a slow death. And I would just want to say to you, I will not do that. I will not give up this place called America, this country that our ancestors fought for. I will not give up at all our children to private education. I will not give up the brothers and sisters who have been in prison and who are now, geared towards prison. I will not give up the idea that we cannot walk upright as human beings. And you mustn't give up either. So you come, thank you, and listen, but you also go out and do the work. Leave the gossip behind. Leave the programs that talk about revenge. Brother Martin was not talking about revenge, he was talking about forgiveness. Why is the country giving you shows that talk about revenge when we are talking about forgiveness and moving as human beings? Morning song and evening walk for Brother Martin Luther King. 1. Tonight, in need of you and God, I move imperfect through this ancient city. Quiet, no one hears, no one feels the tears of multitudes. The silence thickens. I have lost the shore of your kind seasons. Who will hear my voice nasal against distinguished actors? Oh, I am tired of voices without sound. I will rest on this ground full of mass hymns too. You have been here since I can remember, Martin. From Selma to Montgomery, from Watts to Chicago, from Nobel Peace Prize to Memphis, Tennessee, unmoved among the angles and corners of aristocratic confusion. It was a time to be born, forced forward, a time to wander inside drums, the good times with eyes like stars, and soldiers without medals or weapons, but honor, yes. And you told us the storm is rising against the privileged minority of the earth, from which there is no shelter in isolation or armament. And you told us the storm would not abate until a just distribution of the fruits of the earth enables men and women everywhere to live in dignity and human decency. 3. All summer long it has rained, and the water rises in our throats, and all that we sing is rumored forgotten. Whom shall we call when this song comes of age? And they came into the city carrying their fastings in their eyes, and the young 9-year-old Sudanese boy said, I want something to eat at night, a place to sleep. And they came into the city, hands salivating guns. And the young 9-year-old word snapped red with vows, mama, mama, auntie, auntie, I dead, I dead, I dead. 4. In our city of lost alphabets, where only our eyes strengthened the children, you spoke like Peter, like John, you fishermen of tongues, untangling our wings, you inaugurated iron for our mass, exiled no one with your touch, and we felt the thunder in your hands. We are soldiers in the army. We have to fight, although we have to cry. We have to hold up the freedom banners. We have to hold it up until we die. And you said we must keep going, and we became small miracles. Push the wind down into the slow bloodstream of America. Surround the streets and reconcentradas. Tune our legs against Olympic politicians, elaborate cadavers, growing fat underneath Western hats. And we scrape the rust from old laws when floored by floor, window by window, and clean faces rose from the dust, became new brides and bridegrooms among change, men and women coming for their inheritance. And you challenge us to catch up with our own breaths, to breathe in Latinos, Asians, Native Americans, transgenders, whites, blacks, gays, lesbians, Muslims, and Jews and Chicanos, to gather up our rainbow-colored skins in love and peace and racial justice as we try to answer your long-ago question, is there a non-violent peacemaking army that can shut down the Pentagon? And you challenge us to breathe in Bernard Herring's words, the materialistic growth mania for more and more production and more markets for selling unnecessary and even damaging products is a sin against the generations to come. What shall we leave to them? Rubbish, atomic weapons, numerous enough to make the earth uninhabitable, a poisoned atmosphere, polluted water. 5. Love in practice is a harsh and dreadful thing compared to love in dreams, said a Russian writer. Now I know at great cost, Martin, that as we burn, something moves out of the flames, call it spirit or apparition, till no fire or body or ash remain. We breathe out and smell the world again. Amen. 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 A woman, a woman, a woman, amen, men, men, woman, 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 men, men, woman, woman, men, men, woman. 6. Postscript. The earth has tilted, dear Martin, as we awaken each morning to an eternal alarm clock called hope. I count the morning stars, the air so sweet anointing the day. Hope comes on morning sails, and we fold ourselves in the middle of morning as we turn away from a landscape of greed. We carry the sun on our backs and remember you, Martin. Remember the thirst of your eyes, your hands, confessing peace and racial and social and economic justice. We are the now, the herstory and history you tried to make on dishonored walkways. This day has the precision of your dream. In the four corners of this country, we live inside your breath and love and try to answer the most important question of the 21st century. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be human? So we inaugurate across the sound of your words, Brother Martin, not symbols and serums, not peepholes and posturing, not lesions and lecturing. With this new president, we hope, dear Martin, we inaugurate a new day, a time for all Americans. We inaugurate like new men and women should, coming out of themselves towards peace and justice and freedom. So come with yourselves, singing life, 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 singing eyes, singing hands, alarming the death singers that we have come to celebrate life until we become seeing men and women again. Come, 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 come. Inaugurate a new way of breathing peace and justice for the world. Come, 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 brothers and sisters, and it will get better, and it will get better. Ibe, Ibe, Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, poet, activist, educator, and author, SONYA Sanchez.
There's a time in service where you'll hear that the doors of the church are opening. And this is a time in this celebration where we're saying the doors of the movement are open. And to give us the call to conscience and sacrifice, we welcome the senior minister of Plymouth Congregational Church, Washington, D.C., and the national president of Ministers for Racial, Social, and Economic Justice, Reverend Graylin Hagler.
Good evening. I'll just correct it. I'm the former president of Ministers for Racial, Social, and Economic Justice. We have a term limitation in that organization. But it's important to be here this evening. One, to hear from these very diverse voices, but voices that have all the struggles in common. In other words, as people talked about the myriad of struggles out there, we find out as we listen, if we listen, that we are truly sisters and brothers to one another, bound together in movement to bring about a new world, to bring about a new society, and to bring about a new culture and a new understanding. One thing that Reverend King did 46 years ago and throughout his ministry was to challenge the nation that if we did not change the paradigm, nothing would change. That we can go after issue after issue after issue, but unless we change the undergirding of what we do, things will, in the long run, remain the same. And sisters and brothers, we can look around, just like then King referred to America as the greatest purveyor of violence. We can look today and say that still is true. Not only are we the greatest purveyors of violence, but we're the greatest practitioners of violence. All we have to do is look up the road at Sandy Hook. And it's interesting that people got very, very upset and shaken at their core when they saw the violence that took place in Sandy Hook. And we all decry it, and it is senseless. But the fact is, all over America, in cities, young folks are shot down every single day and every single night, and just the news media may play it, but the fact is that people go on with living because it is no crisis. When a young black kid is shot down, it's not a big crisis. The family might be upset. Somebody might say something about it. But in general, people go on with living. That's where we exist because the undergirding of life has not changed. We still practice violence. People were very, very elated all across the country, and particularly in the black community, with the election of President Barack Obama. And it's something great to be elated about. But the reality is because the paradigm has not changed, someone who is black can go into the White House and carry out policies that look the same as every other president that has been in office. To sit up and try to prove that you are as militaristic and as bad as any other president that preceded you is not what we elected to office. We elected to office someone that would be concerned about the hopes and justice that take place in the nation and in the world. We hope that there would be a different dialogue that would take place in the world with countries in Africa, with countries in Latin America, not to sit in and practice the same old paradigm of if we can't conquer you, then we have nothing to do with you. We still need to continue to rage on to end the blockade against Cuba. We need to continue to rage on, not to resist the Bolivarian Revolution, but to lift that up as something that we all should be proud of, that tries to include rather than exclude. We forget that there was a movement that took place all over the country. Some of us have forgotten. That talked about the 99% versus the 1%. Well, brothers and sisters, that was the struggle 46 years ago, and that's the struggle today. If you study your scripture, y'all knew I was going to go there, right? If you study your scripture, the fact that the undergirding for Reverend King was the fact that he read the gospel through the eye and mindset of one who was oppressed. You see, what I'm getting at is that there's a gospel of the empire, and then there's a gospel of liberation that speaks to the oppressed. The empire has been trying to control the gospel, the spiritual voices, towards their own ends. But they really can't control it, because every time you turn around and one empire or another attempts to control the voice that comes through those scriptures, there's another voice that emerges that offers up resistance to the empire. I think about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, for example, in the Confessing Church of Germany, that stayed and remained a resisting power to that empire that we knew as the Third Reich. Or I think about the Underground Railroad, where people just didn't go along with the flow because they heard a voice that spoke to them out of that gospel and said, yes, all God's children need to be free. The fact is what I'm trying to get us in touch with is that, yes, we got all these issues going on. Yes, we got all of these problems in our country and in our world. And yes, sometimes you can get tired, but I'm going to tell you tonight, there's no reason to get tired, because there is a source that comes to us that is divine, that filled my grandmother up and her mother up and filled my daddy up and fills me up. And I know I can't sit down. I can't be quiet, I can't be still, but I got to continue to walk on and march on until justice comes for all God's people. You say, you get tired sometimes. But you know, there's that saying, they say, when I don't feel nowhere's tired. When you say I don't feel nowhere's tired, that's a response to you saying I'm tired. And then you got to remind yourself, I don't feel nowhere's tired. I got to go on and I got to work and see what the end will look like, what the end will be. Somebody tell me something tonight. Tell me, are you ready to bring something good into being? Are you ready to stand up for your neighbor in a spirit of justice? Are you ready to work and struggle so that, as it says in Amos, justice rolls down like water and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream? Are you ready to do that? I remember this spiritual. Some of you know it. Said my mother was a soldier in the army. She held on to the gospel of God. One day she get old, can't fight on anymore. So she stood there and fought on anyhow. That's what we're called to do, is to stand there and fight on anyhow and to not give up. Sisters and brothers, our call today is the same call 46 years ago. We got to stand up for liberation across the board for everybody. For gays and lesbians, we got to stand up for liberation. We got to stand up for liberation and the right for all people to marry under the law. We got to stand up for liberation to bring about a kind of a gentler and kind immigration policy, because it is really our policies that have gone into other countries and wrecked their economies and took away farming lands because it wasn't profitable enough, and therefore we force people to leave their homes. Who wants to leave their home and come to someplace else? If all your family's back there, you come here to hopefully get into a place to work so somebody can survive. We need to wake up. The paradigm hasn't changed. So we got to really get down to the systemic issues. Ramsey Clark, we got to change. We got to get down to how this system destroys over profits. I don't know about you, but where I come from in Washington, D.C., I'll give you an example. In little, tiny Washington, D.C., the politicians got all happy because 6 Walmart stores are moving in the D.C. You hear what I'm saying? 6 Walmart stores, 6 Walmart. We got 2 in a mile and a half of each other, and I'm going to be sandwiched in the middle of them. The fact is basically what has happened in America is that 1% has created a kind of sweatshop economy, and it drugs all the rest of us because we get happy because we can buy little trinkets down at the Walmart and feel like we're somebody for a day, and then that will all break down, crash, and be busted in a day or two, and there we go right back to the sweatshop economy. We got to change the paradigm. You don't shop at Walmart. You don't buy at Walmart until justice takes place in Walmart, until workers have benefits like health insurance. I'm talking about real health insurance and a wage in which to live. That's what we're called to do. We're called to work, build up each other. Now, one thing I want to say also is that sometimes when we get caught up in the struggle, we get angry, we get frustrated, we get sour. And I'm going to urge you tonight, don't let anybody take your joy. Don't let anybody take the laughter out of your mouth. Don't let anybody to take the love out of your heart. If they take the laughter away, if they take the love away, then they've won. They've beaten you down. They've taken the essence out of you that makes you who you are. So, sisters and brothers, we can laugh and smile and love in the midst of the struggle. I'm not going to take too much longer. I'm going to sit down in a moment, but I want to remind you, for those who are believers, for those who are people of conscience, in the church, we celebrated last Sunday, Easter Sunday or Resurrection Sunday. Now, the empire wants to spiritualize that for all of us, right? Make it magical. Make it something that everybody can get excited about, but nobody really understands what is going on. Go out and buy your new suit, your new dress, put on your hat, shine up your shoes, right? You're going out to have Sunday brunch, and hopefully you're coming to church. But one thing is that the empire has tried to control the message. And what I'm getting back is that Jesus was one who was among the poor. Why? Because Jesus was poor himself. John the Baptist was calling people out into the wilderness because he began to feel that the temple religion had become corrupt, had begun to side with the occupiers who were the Romans, and began to put down religious policies that put people down rather than lift people up. A case in point, I can tell you this, and I believe that this is part of the political expedient argument, where Caiaphas calls a high council meeting, a meeting of the Sanhedrin, and he says, you folks don't understand. If we allow him to go on this way, then the Romans are going to come and they're going to put us out of our jobs and take over our country. It's better that this one person should die than the whole nation come to ruin. You hear that? Have you heard that argument before? It's better that Martin Luther King should die than folks begin to rise up and folks begin to demand justice. It's better that Cesar Chavez be moved off onto the sidelines and eventually die because people might find some hope in him. That's the way it always works. And so when it comes down to Resurrection Sunday, this is what it means. It means that the empire thought they had broke them. The empire thought they had put the people down. The empire thought they had won. Those in power thought they had taken those uppity folk and put them back in their place. But as we declare on that morning, there was no body because they couldn't kill it. They couldn't keep it down. They couldn't keep it in a tomb. They couldn't destroy it. He rose up, and because he rose up, I got the power to keep coming back at you, because I don't believe that you can put us down. The people will rise and keep rising and keep rising and keep rising and keep rising and get higher and get higher. The people will rise in the name of righteousness, in the name of justice, in the name of hope, in the name of each other and one another. Keep rising up, people of goodwill. Keep rising up until justice is won. Keep rising up until there is laughter and peace all around. Keep rising up until every drone is out of the sky. Keep rising up until justice comes.
"800 years ago, the king of Persian poets, Sheikh Sa'di, said something about us humans. The children of Adam are limbs of each other, having been born from a single essence. When the calamity of time afflicts one limb, the other limbs cannot remain at rest. If thou hast no sympathy for the pains of others, thou art unworthy to be called by the name of man." This is written in the United Nations, and 800 years later, another spiritual king of our time, Dr. Martin Luther King, said the same thing, expanded it, led millions, and even lost his life for that. So tonight we want to dedicate, to Dr. Martin Luther King, that poem by Sheikh Sa'di, The Children of Adam. My father is going to play it, and I'm going to do a small introduction on this instrument, the balaban.
We were supposed to sing some song together. It's too late. I think it was wonderful. The song that I was going to sing, they did much better in the best way. We Shall Overcome. The chorus was really, fantastic. So we performed the introduction to that. As Lina said, 800 years ago, Iran's kings of poets said it. Before that, King of Kings said it. Present time, Dr. Luther King said it. Still, we don't get it, right? I mean, we're here, we get it, right? But most people, if they don't get it, then, as Dr. Luther King said, before we get rid of war, the war is going to get rid of us. So we just sing the introduction of that, my melody. Nana's going to play balaban. Have a good night.
I hate it when they tell us how far we came to be, as if our people's history started with slavery. Painfully, I discovered they kept the secret. This is the Exodus, like the black Jews out of Egypt. I keep it reality-based with the music I make. Blow up the truth in your face with the style I run with, like the Navy missile that shot down Flight 800. I'm like the Africans who came here before Columbus, and from the 1500s until after tomorrow, I watched Latin America get raped into sorrow. You see, the Spaniards never left después de Colón, and if you don't believe me, you can click on Univision. I never seen so much racism in all of my life. Every program and newscast, all of them white. It's like apartheid with 10% ruling the rest. That type of stress will make me put the tool to your chest. Step in my way, dog, I wouldn't want to be ya. I burn slow like pissing drunk with gonorrhea. I do a free show in North Korea, burning the flag, while J. Edgar Hoover politicians dress up in drag, trying to confuse you, making it hard to follow this. Capitalism and democracy are not synonymous. You swallow propaganda like a birth control pill, selling your soul to the eye on the back of the dollar bill. But that'll never be me, cause I'm leaving the past like an abused wife with the kids, leaving your ass like a drug addict, clean and sober, leaving the stash, unbreakable technique, leaving the plane crash. I'm out with the black box and I refuse to return. I spit reality instead of what you usually learn, and I refuse to be concerned with condescending advice, cause I'm the only person that could change my life. Warm up a little something. It was called, that song was called Leaving the Past. I would do it with the beats, but then this whole place would just sound like echo. This one's called Toast to the Dead. Here's a toast to the dead. If you don't drink, smoke to the head. For the freedom fighters killed by the feds. For those who died hard in the streets, soaking in red, and died slow asleep in a dream, choking in bed. Here's a toast to the dead. For my enemies that are gone. I'm not a coward, so celebrating that would be wrong. I pray to God that your soul will come back again, so I can see you in the next life and finish it then. A toast to the dead. For criminals burning in hell. I wonder how many presidents are burning as well. Emperors, popes, senators, generals, amputees feel unlucky until they see the vegetables. A toast to the dead. For those who are forgotten, written out of history by the corrupted and rotten. Black saints whitewashed during La Reconquista. Thousands of Indios, Spaniards used to conquer the Incas. A moment of silence, I need a moment of violence, like the 19th century Caribbean islands. Long live those who came before that paved the way for me, the warriors and scientists that came before slavery. And if that was too predictable, take that clairvoyance and apply it to your life in the physical. Presumptuous, half-hearted, homunculus. Self-destruction is the power without knowing what the function is. A toast to the dead. For all of my fam, I will never let an idea die with a man. My rhymes are like NASCAR lines designed to give a viewer this. J. Dilla's still alive as long as his music is. A toast to the dead. For rap legends and pioneers, your legacy won't be forsaken as long as I am here. Knowledge of the past and wisdom of the present I teach and leave in the hands of a worthy lieutenant. A toast to the dead. For children with cancer and AIDS, a cure exists and you probably could have been saved. Sad to see medicine, divorce, morality, corporate homewreckers pimping up for salary. A toast to the dead. For those that had died today, the victims and those exonerated by DNA. The only thing worse than giving freedom to the guilty is killing the innocent and leaving your soul filthy. Immortal technique, remember me when I'm gone. I encrypted my lyrics to stay alive in a song, so you'll always keep a piece of my spirit inside when you struggle to complete what I started before I died. But some of you won't survive the changes the earth makes, swallowed by tsunamis, hurricanes, and earthquakes. And that's just the first stage. If you cannot reverse ways and realize that we are one, regardless of our birthplace. One more and then get out of here. Everybody could go home and have some of mom's chicken soup. Somebody asked me, why are you wearing a hat in the house of God? I said to him, listen, if I get to heaven, the pearly gates, and God don't let me in because I'm wearing a hat, then he's not God, and the joke's on me. I always took what my grandmother said very personally. It said it's not about reading the book, it's about living the commitment and the promise to yourself. If your religion only makes you more contemptuous, more judgmental, then not only has that religion failed you, but you failed that religion. If it makes you more accepting, more understanding, if it gives you greater patience and greater clairvoyance to see the good in people that other individuals choose to ignore, then you really are living that spiritual path within God, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, or anything else in the world. So I'll finish with this. Imagine the word of God without religious groupies. Imagine the Savior born in a Mexican hoopty, persecuted single mother in a modern manger. You'd crucify him again like a fucking stranger. Tears of the anger worth more than diamonds and rubies. Imagine being locked up since juvie. Imagine changing your life and still going out like Tukey. Imagine people talking when they never knew me. Imagine a movie that depicted the pain in your life, like them kids in Afghanistan chasing a kite. For most of the world, that's what it's like. Imagine if the person you're supposed to love for the rest of your life is set to marry someone else at the end of the night. They say you fight the greatest jihad in your heart and your mind, and fight the hardest when you start from behind a Masonic design. America's future is mine. Repeat that to yourself, cause if culture's a crime, them numbers tatted on your arm aren't too far behind. They can only conquer you after they murder your mind. So rise up, motherfucker, like the sign of the times. I feel my body weakening, but my spirit is fine, ready to go to war with devils at the drop of a dime, and fight with my rebel army until the stars are aligned. Nostradamus was a white man's prophet who predicated European supremacist logic, because the pilgrims and the conquistador columns killed more innocent people than Hitler and Stalin. I guess the fortune teller skipped an antichrist or two. Brother, give this to the OGs doing life with you, and pray for the problems with the Pope's psychology, so the Vatican will offer an apology. For what? For destroying the people's liberation theology, snatching the spirit of Jesus from people in poverty. Business decisions like keeping people in prison, but had the opposite effect, incarcerating religion. That type of crooked politics imposed on a populace is obvious if you read the Northwood documents. Forget the compliments for what I recorded and live for revolution instead of always dying for it. My legions are led by the spirit of Haile Selassie. Watch me, so even if I'm shot in the chakra, I will prosper. Doppler effect, bumping music out of helicopter, telling the Persians dig up Zoroaster, and tell them I came back as the son of Ahura Mazda. Fish out the Philistine Dagon from the shores of Gaza, and call Quetzalcoatl flying over La Raza. This is my message to the older gods. I'll sacrifice you all to the revolution like the Romanovs, lost in the desert like the Hebrews of Israel. The blood clot system tried to kill me like sickle cell, but I'm alive and I survived the fight another day, cocooned in a coma. I could still hear my mother pray, sister crying out to God, please let my brother stay. Walking towards the light, but something's pulling me the other way. My name is Immortal Technique. I'm from Harlem, New York. I love y'all. God bless you all. ViperRecords.com. Constant Flow in the building. Young Lords. Peace.
I'd like to borrow that hat, if I could, to wear it. I do see my Senior Minister Emeritus here, Dr. Forbes. I'm so glad you're here, present with us this evening. To bring us to a close, I want to thank everyone who brought their narrative and their story to this chancel, this sacred space. It continues to be held sacred. As Dr. Martin stood right here, the Dalai Lama right here, Nelson Mandela right here, the people, Maya Angelou right here, the poetry, the prose, the preaching, the prophetic word that's come forth from this space, and your narratives are all part of that mix, that history. I do want to close with this urgency of now that our brother brought to our attention, the pastor. This urgency of now was proclaimed 60 years ago, and now it's now. Then it was now, and now it's now. I want to remind us as we go forth and we ingest and digest this story and this life and this narrative of Dr. Martin Luther King and the Beyond Vietnam speech and the evil triplets and the critique of our society 60 years ago and now today still pertinent. I want us to realize that our journey is not from here to there. Our journey is always from here to here. If we would burn our hearts, what would the ashes reveal? Our lust, our greed, our want for power, our want for control. If we want to make this journey, the journey should be from here to purify our hearts. That when we take that step to the new paradigm, Pastor, we are taking that step in a pure direction. We're not taking that step because we're going to be on top. We're not taking that step because we're going to get all the cookies. We're taking that step because all of creation is going to survive and thrive because we have burned that in our own hearts. We know ourselves well enough to know we can be just as greedy as the next person. We can just be as lustful as the next person. I want you to go forth from this place, folks, inspired by these narratives. Listen and let it work on you. Let it work on you and figure out how you can get from here to here as a just, integral person, human being, child of God, Muslim, Jew, Christian, Sikh, Baha'i, Buddhist, atheist. How are we going to step forward together with a pure heart? We make that journey from here, this space tonight, to here. Go forth in peace. Work like you don't need the money. Love like you've never been hurt. Dance like nobody's watching. Sing like nobody's listening. And live like this is heaven on earth. Amen.
Somehow this madness must cease. We must stop now. I speak as a child of God and brother to the suffering poor of Vietnam. I speak for those whose land is being laid waste, whose homes are being destroyed, whose culture is being subverted. I speak for the poor of America who are paying the double price of smashed hopes at home and death and corruption in Vietnam. I speak as a citizen of the world, for the world as it stands aghast at the path we have taken. I speak as one who loves America to the leaders of our own nation. The great initiative in this war is ours. The initiative to stop it must be ours. Somehow this madness must cease. We must stop now. I speak as a child of God and brother to the suffering poor of Vietnam. I speak for those whose land is being laid waste, whose homes are being destroyed, whose culture is being subverted. I speak for the poor of America who are paying the double price of smashed hopes at home and death and corruption in Vietnam. I speak as a citizen of the world, for the world as it stands aghast at the path we have taken. I speak as one who loves America to the leaders of our own nation. The great initiative in this war is ours. The initiative to stop it must be ours.